The Mandela effect refers to a phenomenon in which a large group of people collectively remember an event, fact, or detail differently from how it occurred or is currently known to be. It is said to be coined by paranormal researcher Fiona Broom. The term was created following the death of former South African President Nelson Mandela in 2013. Many individuals claim to distinctly recall Mandela dying while still in prison during the 1980s, even though official historical records indicate he was released in 1990 and subsequently became the country's president. The Mandela effect can be seen as a collective misremembering or distortion of information that has been disseminated widely across a population, often fueled by the internet and social media. It is not simply a case of a few individuals misremembering, but rather a large number of people sharing the same false memory. This phenomenon can be attributed to a variety of factors, including the fallibility of human memory and the susceptibility of our brains to suggestion and misinformation. The Mandela effect is often associated with false memories that develop over time due to suggestion, the sharing of inaccurate information, or the reinterpretation of events. Today I would like to examine the Mandela effect as I believe it to be one of the strangest phenomena of late. This phenomenon is usually disregarded as collective false memory. This is possible, but if it's not, what does this effect itself imply about our reality? The strange and bizarre nature of these Mandela effects made the concept a popular discussion on YouTube. The changes discussed are usually the same popular ones repeated. The Berenstain Bears, logo changes or minuscule differences that could easily be explained away by false collective memory, implanted memory, or simply misremembering particular phrasing, lyric, etc. A perfect example of this is the Mandela effect regarding a movie named Shazam where the comedian Sinbad plays a genie. No such movie ever existed, however there was a movie named Kazam about a genie played by Shaquille O'Neal, which released the same year as a popular Sinbad children's film produced by Disney. There are a bunch of these obviously false memory Mandela effects, which I believe are discussed more frequently in order to lighten the subject overall, so those affected may dismiss the concept entirely as false memory. Because not only do many people have these false memories, but what about the memories associated with those memories? What if Bugs Bunny is your favorite character and you just so happen to get a Looney Tunes logo tattooed on you, only to wake up one day and realize you spelled the tunes in Looney Tunes wrong? Or maybe you spelled it as you originally remembered, but your tattoo itself has somehow changed to the correct spelling. This is the most interesting part of the Mandela effect in my opinion. When something from the past has been altered, all evidence of its original existence ceases to exist. All that is left is our possibly false memory of its existence. You may be thinking, what if you find and put on your old personal VHS copy of a Mandela-affected film? Would the affected scene remain frozen in time exactly how you remembered? Or similarly, if you listened to a record or cassette rather than a digital copy of a song, would the affected song be changed or as you remembered? If you are someone who has already tried this, then you already know the affected thing remains altered, and this can lead to altered reality residue. So what is altered reality residue? It's the memories or evidence associated with an alleged false memory. Like the example used earlier of a logo you tattooed on your skin that has since changed, or any associated memories that support the original reality you remember. We will examine a few instances of this residue and some I've experienced personally, which is why I believe this one of the most important yet unexamined or explained phenomena.
Who's that Pokemon?
Now, if you grew up in the 90s, you most likely got this answer correct, and if you did, your answer would be Onyx. But the real question is, how do you spell Onyx?
It's Onyx!
If you said ONYX, not only would you be wrong, but so would most Pokemon fans. Even these collectors on eBay. Why would they list this card with the incorrect spelling if the correct spelling is right there on the card? Now with my personal examples. The first one is the Mandela effect regarding Mr. Moneybags from the popular board game Monopoly. The Mandela effect here is this mascot for the game never at any point in the game's history wore a monocle. Now this is interesting to me because the only reason why I know what a monocle is because of this character. Before having access to technology like Google, I had to ask my mother what one-sided lenses were and what were they called. You usually see them associated with rich people in cartoons, and I remember thinking monocle is easy to remember because the word is similar to monopoly. Speaking of, I also remember the 1998 deluxe edition of Monopoly having a Mr. Moneybags piece. It was gold and posed similarly to this with one arm out holding his top hat. However, the piece doesn't exist. This was the closest thing I could find online. Everyone in my family usually picked the same pieces, so I suspect it was either replaced by one of these two pieces, as they are the least familiar. Anyone of any age that I ask if the Monopoly man wears a monocle 100% of the time says yes. Secondly, I remember thinking the Mona Lisa smiled as a kid, but then getting older and realizing she doesn't, and thinking that was weird. Strangely enough, the Mandela effect here is that she actually does smile. So, since I originally remember her smiling but also remember being wrong about it later on, I don't know what to make of that one. In addition, although I have no residue-associated memories for these, I do remember the Kit Kat logo having a dash. This Ford logo, this VW logo, Berenstein Bears and Cheez-Its, to name a few. But this Mandela effect, not only do I have residue, but I saw it every day and kids at my school said it for weeks. And that is the line,
I see white people.
From the Wayans Brothers parody comedy Scary Movie. This line is not in the movie, but not only do I know for a fact this line was in the movie because I've seen it 100 times, but because the line was in the trailer that they used to show on TV constantly during the time of the movie's promotion.
I see dead people.
And the line is not in any version of the trailer I could find. Interestingly enough, the parody of the joke is now lost in its current form, which is true for other Mandela effects, where parodies of the original are now wrong.
Who is this ghastly man?
Ace Ventura, pet detective. And you must be the Monopoly guy. Hey, thanks for the free parking.
Just take that old record top shelf. I sit and listen to myself. Today's music ain't got the same song. I like that old kind of rock and roll. Don't try to take me to a disco.
Hi, Perry. No, you get out.
Well, I
get
thought
out.
it could be fun.
No.
He said no.
But you told me.
I assumed he would say yes.
Spears. Most of you guys may recall the music video Oops, I Did It Again by Britney Spears, right? It's her iconic song and music video where she is depicted wearing a red skin-tight suit. Now, many people recall Britney Spears wearing a headset microphone alongside her red suit. Some even suggest that there's evidence within the music video itself showing her reaching for a headset that's simply not there. Creepy. There's also this quote-unquote residual evidence that a lot of people point to when this Mandela effect is brought up, coming in the form of a Lizzie McGuire episode where she pretends to be Britney Spears in the Oops, I Did It Again music video, even wearing a headset microphone. Take a look.
Hip huggers. It'd be so oops, I did it again.
Mom, Dad, Lizzie's talking about dressing like Britney Spears.
The crazy thing is that even the costumes people wear referencing the music video contain a headset microphone. How are all these people misremembering something so random? Do you guys recall it this way, where she never had a headset on? One more piece of evidence comes in the form of an official doll that contains Britney and her costume she wore on the music video. The damning thing is that it contains a headset microphone that was never there to begin with. Why would they include the headset if it has nothing to do with the Britney Spears music video whatsoever? Did they avoid watching the music video when developing the product? Crazy.
or references and merchandise appear to remain as we remember them, which to me appears more like a glitch or patch to reality rather than time travel or some other explanation. I've played a good amount of video games growing up, and I find these Mandela effects the most interesting, as video games are a form of media that is usually replayed and consumed multiple times. Considering it's also an experience you interact with, rather than a passively experience, it makes it unlikely that you would forget or misremember your favorite games. At times, games can even require you to use your memory to be proficient in the game or complete a level. Here are a few examples of affected video games.
Today we're starting off with a video game classic, Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System. Released back in 1985 in America, this title introduced millions to the classic left-to-right side-scrolling genre of video games. From the very first level, 1-1, it taught you the fundamentals of how to play Mario, as well as a ton of its gameplay features. Enemies to step on, mushrooms to collect, secrets to find, but here is where the Mandela effect comes in. Did level 1-1 of Super Mario Bros. Have a piranha plant in it? If you're unfamiliar with what a piranha plant is, it's the sharp-toothed plant that comes out of the green pipes and tries to eat Mario. So let me ask you, the experts, did level 1-1 of Super Mario Bros. Have a piranha plant in it? Yes or no? As it is now, the very first level in Super Mario Bros. Does not actually have a piranha plant in it. This Mandela effect recently became popular online because of a post regarding its placement in the first level. The commenter was talking about his earliest gaming memories and how it took him so long as a child to beat the first level because of the piranha plant that came out of the pipe. Amazingly enough, when it was brought up the first level didn't have a piranha plant, the thread turned to insanity. I'm curious to hear who among you remembers Super Mario Bros. With the piranha plant on level 1-1 or without. Up next, we're talking about Mario Kart, the legendary arcade-style racing game that people have enjoyed for decades. And today, specifically, the Nintendo 64 version, Mario Kart 64. This Mandela effect has to do with the insanely unforgiving track, Rainbow Road. The difficulty comes from its trackless edges and hairpin turns. So tell me, did Mario Kart 64's version of Rainbow Road have rails along the sides? The Mandela effect here is that so many people remember Mario Kart 64's Rainbow Road not having rails, thus making it a much tougher race. But apparently it's always had rails? The Super Nintendo version of Mario Kart's Rainbow Road did not have rails, but apparently the N64 one did. This seems like an open and shut case of potentially mixing up the games, but numerous people online claim that they have only played the Nintendo 64 version. So why would they know what's in the older version of Mario Kart that they've never played? I'm not sure how many people in my audience play video games or have played Call of Duty before, but just follow me here. This gets pretty interesting. Call of Duty is an annualized first-person shooter franchise, with a new release every single year. Because of this form of overwhelming monetization, Call of Duty can make a lot of extra money by playing with people's nostalgia, by bringing back multiplayer maps from older games into the newer games. This Mandela effect stems from one of those situations. There was an older map called Standoff from Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Now this map was brought over to the newer Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War video game. So a map from 2012 returned in 2021. Obviously older fans were excited and happily replayed this map again in multiplayer, until a professional Call of Duty player tweeted this: "Can't believe they just added this sign." And from there, this Mandela effect blew up. One professional streamer or player after another jumped in asking the same question: why remake this entire map, but then add this random sign in this random spot in the map? I mean, it isn't outside of the level, it's a real object in the game, so it isn't just art. For example, if you threw a grenade at it, it would bounce off of it. If someone was sniping at you, it was potential cover for you to hide behind. So it's a tangible change to a map, and no one really knows why it was changed. So people went back to the original Call of Duty Black Ops game and discovered that the sign wasn't just a new addition to the map's remake. It was always there, in both games. To make things even freakier for professional Call of Duty players, fans and amateur sleuths started finding old clips of those same pro players playing on the old map from back in the day. And in those clips existed the sign that the pro players don't remember. I mean, the obvious, easy, least exciting possibility is that the sign was always there and people simply didn't notice it. I'm sure that's absolutely a possibility. But as I'll speak about later in the video during the Britney Spears Mandela Effect segment, fans know their fandom. When it comes to this kind of stuff, you gotta ask the fans. So I sat down out of curiosity and I watched multiple Call of Duty pros and professional streamers freak out over this change. Like legitimately freak out. Some even claiming that this is the first Mandela effect that has ever affected them. So however you stand on this Mandela effect, if you remember the sign or not, I've got to say it's incredible how a sign, a simple sign, can cause so much mental trauma for so many people. Imagine what a massive change would create in people. It's a pretty scary thought. Lastly, I'll say this. In a game like Call of Duty, there are only so many maps in each game. So a part of being a professional is learning every single map inside and out. When you play these games, you play them over and over and over again. Polling from other people on Twitter have shown that a slight majority don't remember the sign being there. So where do you fall? This one's pretty interesting. It's almost a 50-50 split. For those of you who have played these games, I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Is it just a sign, or is it something more? Next up is a Mandela effect that relates to the very popular video game Halo 2. Now, this Mandela effect is more of an explanation, and not so much of a question, so I'm going to try and break it down as simply as I can. In every mainline Halo game from Halo 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, you could play split screen in co-op, meaning that it splits the TV screen into two halves and you and your friend can play at the same time. Now, this co-op feature has existed on every single level in Halo 1 through 4, but now it doesn't. Somehow the first two levels of Halo 2 are no longer playable in co-op, and they never have been. No matter what you do, you can't even force it to work in these games on the original Xbox game or the remastered version on Xbox One and PC. It doesn't exist anymore, it has simply vanished. Creepier still, you can't find footage of this existing. Now, the easiest explanation is that it has always been this way and that Halo fans are being silly. Well, here's the argument against that. Halo is a game that is built around replayability, meaning you can play it over and over and over and discover new things and have new experiences. Single player, co-op, multiplayer, the trifecta of Halo. If somehow the first two levels of Halo 2 weren't playable in co-op, this detail would have been known and discussed years ago. I mean, this game originally came out in 2004, yet somehow this has never come up before on the internet until this year. That's incredible, almost inconceivable. The first level is called The Heretic, and it's simply a cutscene, or an animated movie. But since this would be in co-op, it would just be playing for both players. As of now, you can't play that with another person. Even sitting in front of the same TV, if you say let's play co-op and press start, they just skip the opening cutscene. It simply doesn't play. The second level is called The Armory, and this one is especially confusing because plenty of people have memories of playing this level with a friend, myself included. This is one of the craziest Mandela effects I've ever encountered because I have memories playing this level with my cousin when I was younger. I can see it clear as day. Both of us were trapped in that tiny monorail as it moved from one part of the level to another, while we jumped around waiting to start shooting. This one is unexplainable. I just don't get it. There's even a comment I found with over 1,100 thumbs up. Somehow everyone is misremembering, and this is all a fabrication or something has changed. And 1,100, that's a lot of people. Did you ever play these levels in co-op, or have you never been able to? I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Let's talk about one of the most acclaimed video games of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64 console, released all the way back in 1998. In this game, there is a location called the Fishing Pond in Lake Hylia, where you, playing as Link, can relax and fish to your heart's content. The pond owner allows you in, sells you bait, and lets you go wild. Now, there is a legendary fish in this pond that has been discussed, debated, and searched for as long as people could comment about it online. This is the Hylian loach, the rarest and most sought-after fish in the game. Not only is it hard to find, it's even tougher to catch. So what is the Mandela effect regarding the Hylian loach? Well, it turns out that the Hylian loach doesn't exist in Ocarina of Time anymore. Or at least its name doesn't. What so many people remember as the Hylian loach is now called the Hyrule loach. And I could understand some people never having heard of this before saying, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you spent hours of your youth in that pond fishing for this legendary beast, you know this feels weird and wrong. And if you look up Hylian loach online, you'll come across numerous guides, game fact pages, and forum posts from back in the day. Comparatively, there are significantly more search results for the Hylian loach than there are for the Hyrule loach. So is this simply a case of the majority of people online misremembering this legendary fish's name? Or has something changed? Let's dive deep into this topic. Let's check out the official Nintendo Power Player's Guide for The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I'm sure this strategy guide from 1998 will surely solve our mystery. On page 56 and 57, we have an entire spread about Lake Hylia, not Lake Hyrule. So does it mention the loach? Oh yeah. Unfortunately though, it only says this: with the help of a special lure, Link caught the loach, the largest fish the pond has to offer. Meaning this strategy guide mentions the word loach, but not the name that so many people are arguing over. I mean, that's just hilarious. So then I found another strategy guide, an unofficial guide from 1998 by Bradley Games. And it mentions a huge fish called the loach, but again, no exact name. Incredible. So let's investigate further. It turns out that the Hylian Loach does appear in another Zelda game, the 2006 Nintendo Wii and Nintendo GameCube versions of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. In this title, the fish is still sporting the name that so many of us remember, the Hylian Loach. In fact, there's even a book in this game, with a joke as a title, called The Legend of the Hylian Loach Twilight Fish. It's almost like this game is aware of the mystery. Now you might be thinking, okay, these are different fish, who cares? Maybe everyone just got it wrong. But then there is a picture in Twilight Princess of the pond owner from Ocarina of Time holding a Hylian Loach. I mean, that's as direct a connection to one another as you could make. So let's look at the timeline here. 1998, it's a Hylian Loach, or at least people think it is. It's now apparently a Hyrule Loach. Next up is 2006. It's now a Hylian Loach. So is there any other evidence or residue that it was once called a Hylian Loach before 2006? Because right now it's all based off of memories, a photo in Twilight Princess, and a bunch of online posts, comments, and videos. Upon doing even more research on this stupid fish, I found something really fascinating. I learned that it was mentioned in another of Nintendo's video games. This game is Animal Crossing for the Nintendo GameCube, that was released in 2002. Now, Animal Crossing is one of the most fun and relaxing games ever. Among the many things that you could do in that title, one of those is fish. And if you were lucky enough, you could even catch a loach. Now in that game, it was simply called a loach. But if you did catch one, you'd receive text on screen that read, "I caught a loach." You don't suppose it's Hylian, do you? And there it is, another Nintendo game making a direct reference to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time's rare fish and legendary catch. The timing lines up, and the joke only works if everyone thinks that fish is indeed called a Hylian Loach. That's right, this text was written after Ocarina of Time, but before Twilight Princess. It is the perfect piece of evidence that at least the localizers and writers at Nintendo of America, the people writing and publishing this game, believe the fish was called a Hylian Loach, a name that now doesn't make any sense if there wasn't a Hylian Loach until 2006 with Twilight Princess. Why would they make a joke about a Hylian Loach if it was never actually called that? Just think about this for a second. There was a fish name in 1998. In 2002 they referenced the fish name, and in 2006 is actually the first time it was ever used now. Why would there be references and jokes to the name that never existed if it didn't exist? In fact, after seeing all this information, I'd argue that the Hylian Loach in Twilight Princess was named that because of the original and now seemingly changed name that never existed. This change is the perfect example of a Mandela effect and the weird ripple effect it creates. The original name in the original game was seemingly and miraculously changed, but its effects and lasting impacts weren't. This Mandela effect has caused a ton of controversy and a lot of debate online. I'm talking about the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES, the console that released in America in 1985. As anyone who has ever owned the system knows, when you insert a game cartridge into the system, you have to press the cartridge down into place before pressing the power button. Only after these steps are completed will the game actually play. And if you messed up any of these steps, or if the 72-pin connector inside the device was damaged, you'd instead get an infuriating red blinking light letting you know it wasn't going to work. Now, I've owned two NESs in my lifetime. One was a brand new console, purchased from a toy store, and the other was one that I purchased years later on the secondhand market because I wanted to experience some nostalgia. Now, after hearing all this, you might be wondering, what is the Mandela effect regarding this? Here it is. Apparently, you don't have to press the game cartridges down to play them. And not just that, you never have. When I first heard this, I thought, what? There's no way this is correct. But it seems like it is. The games were apparently playable without pressing them all the way down in the system. And if you've never used an NES before, you have no idea how mind-blowing this actually is. It totally changes the functionality of a device people have used for over 35 years. So I've been digging into this topic for days, and it's been really strange. I've found forum posts from 2008, 2010, 2014, and 2018 of people being confused that their NES systems work without their game cartridges being pushed down all the way. Then on the other side of the internet, I keep finding videos of people saying this is an effect of replacing the 72-pin connector inside the device. But surely this isn't just a case of every single NES console out there having its internals replaced, right? You're talking potentially tens of millions of consoles and all of them have had their internals replaced? I suppose it's a possibility, but I've also found Reddit threads and comments from people claiming that they have their original NES consoles from their childhood that have never had anything replaced and now work without pushing down the game cartridges. Weird mysteries like this are always so fun to pursue and try to solve. Honestly, this whole NES situation has had me scratching my head. If I still had either of my NES consoles from back in the day, I'd check them, but I don't. I had the perfect situation to test them too, one original and one previously owned. It's the best test case possible. But alas. Next up, I found a helpful YouTube guide to getting your NES to work if it isn't. Cleaning it, wiggling the cartridge back and forth, etc. You know all the methods. Then randomly he drops the phrase,
"So if the cartridge didn't work after sliding it back and forth and cleaning the cartridge, go ahead and push down so that it goes up, but don't remove it. Just leave it like that and then hit power." And sure enough, it works in that position as well.
Just leave the cartridge up and turn it on. It works perfectly. This is why we have trust issues. I don't understand how this thing that never worked and has never worked now totally works. I had to go back to the beginning to see if I was really losing my mind. So I looked up an original owner's manual for the Nintendo Entertainment System just to see what it said. Just as I remembered from back then, it says, press down on the game pack until it locks into place and close the chamber lid. There it is, evidence straight from Nintendo that you did indeed have to press the game cartridge down, or game pack as they called it back then, down to get the game to play. Is this just a case of all of these consoles being repaired with aftermarket parts? Has this ability always been there and somehow tens of millions of people just didn't notice? Is it all simply replaced 72-pin connectors that function differently than they should? Malfunctioning hardware across the world? Or has something changed, where you can now play your NES games without pressing down the cartridge? I've seen so much conflicting information on this Mandela effect, my head is spinning. I don't know what this means for the NES, or for this being a potential Mandela effect, but what this does mean is that history used to say you had to press it down, and now that always assumed fact is being questioned. This bizarre true story begins all the way back in July 2010 on a Pokemon fan art thread on a website called 4chan. 4chan is a unique website in the fact that it doesn't track your IP address, meaning you can't be followed or looked up after the fact. This kind of anonymous freedom usually leads to people saying all kinds of bad things, but in this case, it leaves us with an amazing mystery and no way of fully solving it. This particular Pokemon thread was started by a poster offering a challenge to draw your favorite Pokemon without looking at any kind of reference. Basically meaning draw your favorite Pokemon by memory only, don't look up any artwork. Simple enough, right? After a few entries, an anonymous user drew this weird doodle. A strange drawing of a blue-colored frog-like creature with a yellow spiral pattern on its stomach. The strange part about this is that this isn't a Pokemon. It isn't now, and it wasn't then. It was just a poorly drawn doodle made for laughs? Trolling? Or was it? The reactions to this drawing were hilarious. Laughter, humor, dismissive comments, about everything you'd expect. Then, the anonymous user was asked what Pokemon this doodle was, and he replied, Tentaquill. So at this point, I'd like to acknowledge that some viewers obviously have no idea about the inner workings of Pokemon. That's fine. I'll do my best to keep it as simple and easy to understand in this video. Tentaquill is a confusing name for a number of reasons. First of all, the name is a combination of two already existing Pokemon, Tentacool and Cyndaquil. This is what they both look like. Obviously, there is no other relation between these two than the combined names for Tentaquill. The second detail is that each of these Pokemon used in this name came from the first two generations of Pokemon. Now stick with me here, I'm going to make it simple. Each time there is a big new Pokemon game, it is labeled a generation. The first generation was introduced as Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue for the Game Boy. This first generation had 151 Pokemon in it, and this is where Tentacool comes from. The second generation was introduced as Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver. The second generation added 100 new Pokemon, bringing the total up to 251. This is where Cyndaquil comes from. So there you go, you understand all the details needed. Generation 1 and 2 are all that matters in this video. So now, back to the mystery. Tentaquill became an internet meme spawning countless jokes, videos, and he was even later modded into some of the original games. So he began his life as a doodle, but in the end, he became this thing that was much bigger than that. The end. But wait, where's the Mandela effect? Well, we're getting there, and trust me, it's worth the build-up. Stick with me. When games are being developed, they aren't fully playable. It takes a long time and a lot of revisions to get to a final product that people in the public can actually play. When the pieces first come together and you can actually play it somewhat, this is called an alpha. When the game starts to become good enough that you can start showing it off without it being fully finished, this is called a beta. Obviously there is more to it than this, but I'm trying to keep it very simple for you. Japan, 1997. Nintendo, the publisher of Pokemon, comes to a massive event called Space World, where developers and publishers show off their new and upcoming games. Displayed there is the beta for Pokemon Gold and Silver. This beta was short, playable, and tons of the pieces that were included within it would never appear in the retail release. The game changed drastically after this show, and the final game that came out was very different than the beta. Only a select few people in the Japanese public got to actually play this beta. So now that you have all of the history lessons, I'm going to bring it all back together to a time that's a little bit more relevant to us. 2018. 8 years after a doodle of Tentaquill was first posted online, randomly, the demo from 1997 of Pokemon Gold and Silver from Space World was released online. The internet went into a frenzy. Digging through the beta, they were tearing open the code that made the game to find rare and unreleased art assets, music, and features that we never got to see. Think of it like a time capsule from 1999. What were the developers doing? What did they create? What was inside of this game that we never got to see? Well, this is how we got to see it. Included in those files was the original line of the 100 Pokemon that they were going to include in Pokemon Gold and Silver. Now, some were familiar to us because they ended up in the final game, but many were completely new and never before seen. And within this exciting discovery of never before seen Pokemon was one that really stood out. A strangely familiar, but somehow brand new Pokemon. It was Tentaquil in all but the name. Somehow an anonymous poster on 4chan drew from memory a real Pokemon design that was never released or revealed 8 years before anyone else ever knew about it. What in the world? How on earth did he or she know? By all accounts, it isn't possible. These beta Pokemon, they were never released or revealed to the public. This demo was only seen and played in Japan. And these designs, they were locked away in that code, meaning that no one playing in Space World could have accessed these designs. These were locked away inside the code, they were not actually included in the beta. So by all accounts, this is impossible. It turns out the internet felt the same way. So tell me, what do you think? Is this an example of the Mandela effect, or something else? As I briefly mentioned in the beginning of this video, this mystery can never be fully solved because of the forced anonymous nature of 4chan. Because of this, we can't see who the original creator of the Tentaquil drawing was, and because of that, we'll never get to hear his or her explanation. What do you think about all this? Is this all pure coincidence? Was this anonymous commenter privy to Japanese insider information, and from one of the tightest-lipped companies in the video game industry? And then to follow up on that question, if you said yes, with that secret information that he or she obtained, they used it to doodle out one of the cut Pokemon on a forum 11 years later, just to be made fun of for years and years, and then lastly to be redeemed 8 years later anonymously for internet points? This is one of those truth is stranger than fiction stories.
Maybe our brains are really making this all up, which brings us to our final example.
As the majority agree that they remember a cornucopia sitting in the company logo. Today we go over the evidence provided to us by our friends on Reddit, Twitter, and put simply all across the internet. The simple explanation theory. This one puts forth the idea that the simplest answer is the right one, and that people are misremembering the logo with some other pop culture staple, though this isn't quite the case for some, as the similar logo designs that some say they are mistaking them for are not as popular on the international level as some might think. And yes, they are popular outside of America, though there is no popular or competing brand that people are simply mistaking this for. Not to justify the phenomenon at least, unless you're an avid MAGA supporter. This isn't the case. Like this Reddit user puts it, the Fruit of the Loom logo is literally how I learned what a cornucopia is. It may not be on the underwear, but at some points there was absolutely packaging or something with a cornucopia on it. I didn't see another cornucopia until the Hunger Games movie, and I remembered what it was because of the Fruit of the Loom logo. Ant Bully. In the 2006 animated film Ant Bully, which is a blast of nostalgia for me, I don't know if anyone else remembers this film, there's a scene in which an underwear is shown, and on the tag is a reference to the Fruit of the Loom logo, containing what? Yeah, a cornucopia. While finding this, I found a notable comment that seems to be consistent across the internet. People remember referring to the cornucopia as a quote-unquote loom due to the brand's name. Like this Reddit user puts it, this one bugs me to no end. I feel like we've all got the same memory of learning what a cornucopia was from the logo, or were corrected when we mistakenly called it a loom. I do not remember a cornucopia on the tag, but I do remember a commercial with fruit falling out of a cornucopia. Newspaper findings. Some have found quote-unquote residual evidence for this Mandela effect on old newspaper articles which at all mention the Fruit of the Loom logo. One creepy finding is titled, "Well, it's corny and copious," stating, a 4th grade teacher in Brainerd, Minnesota recently drew a horn of plenty on the blackboard and asked the class if anyone knew the correct name for it. One child raised his hand and answered, "I know, it's a fruit of the loom." This newspaper article from the 90s reads, brands were chosen for slogan value, Fruit of the Loom, which offers a cornucopia label that echoes Readley's Fruit Basket. South Park. In 2012, South Park released the episode titled I Should Have Never Gone Ziplining, where they show Eric Cartman's underwear, and on the tag there's a Fruit of the Loom logo parody which contains, you guessed it, a cornucopia. The knockoff explanation. Some believe that the reason for this misconception is because the logos containing the cornucopias did in fact exist, but they were knockoffs with subtle logo changes. No, this doesn't serve as a reasonable explanation due to the fact that Fruit of the Loom is already relatively affordable. It's not Nike or Adidas. The profit margin wouldn't be much. I mean, they sell them at Walmart. Even then, nobody has come up with a picture showing off the legitimate tag that displays a cornucopia and the logo. At least none that are 100% reliable. Frank West's damning evidence. In 1973, Frank West released an album, the cover parodying the Fruit of the Loom logo, titled Flute of the Loom. Now, someone was able to track down the person who created his album cover, and found that they are Mandela Effect believer. The Reddit post discovering this states, one piece of residue you may be aware of is the Flute of the Loom album by Frank West. I learned that the artist behind the album cover was a man named Ellis Chappell. He still has a studio website, so I decided to fill out the website form and see what he had to say. Here is what I sent him. Hi, are you the person who painted the album artwork for Flute of the Loom? Would it be alright if we asked you a couple of questions about your inspiration for the design? Thank you. Name redacted. I received a reply the next day from Reed Chappell, Ellis' son. Hi, redacted. This is Reed, Ellis' son, responding for my dad here. I remember the cornucopia specifically, as does my dad. This is the second time we've been contacted about this album cover, and Ellis and I are more than happy to answer any questions you have about it. I was a little kid when Ellis painted the Flute of the Loom cover, and I remember specifically this album being a reference to the cornucopia and Fruit of the Loom's original logo, which is where my dad says he specifically got the inspiration for the design. When I talked to him about it, he said, "Why the hell else would I have used a cornucopia? The food coming out of the flute is soul food, actually. A ham hock, cabbage, black-eyed peas, etc." I remember when, in my mind, Fruit of the Loom quit using a cornucopia on their logo and switched to just using fruit by itself. It impressed me because I thought the logo looked better with a cornucopia in it. In my memories, this was roughly around 1978 when I was in 2nd grade. So anyways, feel free to ask away. Reading this, it seems that they had no idea that the logo never contained a cornucopia in the entirety of the company's existence. Just like a lot of other people, they believed that it did in fact exist, but was simply changed by the company. Here are Q&A responses from the artist himself. Do you know for certain that there was a cornucopia? There had to be. I would have no reason to paint the image that way if there had not been a cornucopia. The flute takes the place of the cornucopia, but it would not make any sense at all if there had not been a cornucopia to begin with. It's a take off the label, so it has to resemble the label substantially, otherwise it would make no sense. Did you draw/paint this album cover from memory, or did you have a photo, print, or clothing item you used as reference? I think I had a t-shirt with the Fruit of the Loom label that I looked at for reference. I used to have, in fact I still have a lot of them, file folders with images such as a folder for musical instruments or a folder for trucks or automobiles. But this piece was primarily made from my imagination other than looking at the Fruit of the Loom label. The leaf theory. Many suggest that the brown leaf in one of the variations of the logo could have been mistaken as a cornucopia, leading to this massive misconception, though the leaves and positions therein do not resemble a cornucopia, at least not to the majority of believers. I'd also like to point out the argument that states the only reason we remember a cornucopia is because we associate them with a bundle of fruit due to the Thanksgiving holiday. Though wouldn't this mean that we would associate other logos that contain fruits with cornucopias? And what about the people who remember the cornucopia that don't live in the United States of America? What are they confusing it with? And why don't they confuse it with another item? Like for instance a brown barrel, a fruit basket, a bowl, or simply a brown bag? Why is it always remembered as a cornucopia? What do you guys think about this? Man, I swear I remember a Fruit of the Loom commercial from when I was younger where dudes were all dressed up as the fruits and they literally stood in front of one of these with a white background all around them. I for sure recall this commercial. I was grapes for Halloween once. Do any of you guys recall this commercial? Is this lost media or a Mandela effect? This last piece of quote-unquote evidence comes in the form of a trademark filed by the Fruit of the Loom company. If you take a look at the details, it lists the logo as having a cornucopia alongside the fruits, though the official art above has no cornucopia in sight. Though if we take a closer look, it does say that the trademark was then cancelled. Or did the Mandela effect erase the original logo from our history? Funny enough, Fruit of the Loom changed their logo to include a cornucopia on April Fool's Day 2022, updating their website to show their recreation, though most say that they didn't recreate the logo well. Something to note is that the cornucopia found in the popular image used the most to depict the Mandela effect was simply taken from a stock image website. With little effort, someone was able to perfectly recreate the logo everyone remembers. The human brain, though strong and perseverant, it is still malleable. I'm not here to lie, human memory is unreliable, but these entries do push hard to persuade me to think that maybe there is a reality where cornucopias existed on the tags of the Fruit of the Loom undergarments.
Has any Mandela effects affected you personally? Now that we have a few examples out of the way and before we move forward in this series, I would like to leave you with a thought. If some sort of change did occur, what does that mean for teenagers or anyone born after 2012? They would be too young to experience this phenomenon, therefore making it exclusive to those of a specific age group. Is this a clue into the nature of our reality?